made regarding these two movements. One which I would say is, if we look to Islam, we need to understand that there is a concept of equality. And when we take this away from the narrative or the discussions, we find this problem that we incline towards masculinity or feminism. And when we need to appreciate that when God views us in Islam, he views us as humans, equally humans, okay? Men and women are seen as the same. They're seen the same when it comes to worship, so ibadah. So your value as a human, your value as a worshipper is same in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of being equal. And I think when this is not taught to our younger generation, then we come across this problem where they're listening to narratives which are saying that women are lesser, subordinates, or in some cases that men are oppressive. So now men become defensive, women try to become active. Now, that's not to say that, for example, that there are certain societies or certain communities which may oppress one or the other of the gender, now in which case you need to fight for social justice. But the question is that if we were to understand our religion in the first place, and without it being in any way twisted in any form, we would know that the Quran, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we read it, it speaks to us and it tells us that we're equal in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when it comes to society, we have to look at the type of society and whether it's conducive to allow protection. So one of the things we find is problematic here is that when we try to protect women as like in a guardianship role, so men take up this role, and this can sometimes be problematic because women obviously want to be liberated, free, and choose to do their own activities. That when we find a society like that which tries to in some ways restrict women from things that Islam doesn't restrict, for example, opportunities for education. We've seen this, have we not, around the world, where we find the opportunities for education gone. So now you can imagine women will think that, well, this is something that I don't agree with, and even Islam doesn't agree with this. But they won't know that Islam doesn't agree with this because it's never been told to them. And similarly like this, certain roles in employment, where we restrict women in employment. Quite often you think that even in like the third world, women are restricted from homes to be in their home environment all the time. Yet they're not. And I just give you an example. When you go to the countryside and so on, and for example, you go to South Asia, and you look to the women, they're not actually locked in their homes. They're quite active in the community. And you wouldn't think that. They actually go out and work in agriculture, in society as teachers and so on. So I think sometimes it comes from a lack of understanding that the opportunities that Islam gives you, that the starting basis is that you, in the eyes of Allah, you're equal. Okay, you're no way oppressed, but if you're born a woman or if you're born a man, you're not given the extra burden and so on. But then what we can do is we can pick the type of role that suits us, yes? The role that is complementary to you. For example, we may be talking about this a bit later on about who's the breadwinner in a relationship when you marry and so on, who's the homemaker. These depends on which is complementary to the type of person and the role that you have in that relationship. So yes, I think they can be problematic because they're void of actually that first word which I said, criterion Furqan. What is our basis for following these sort of ideologies and so on? And obviously, as the sister mentioned, it can lead to going astray, and that is something that we don't want to do. We always say that Allah keep us on the straight path. So may Allah grant us that tawfiq. Ameen.